My mom knew I was paying for everything. One day, after hosting her birthday party alone with my money, she said, "You're so desperate to be liked." I moved out that night without saying a word. 2 days later, they called screaming. The mortgage didn't go through. It's been a few months now, but sometimes it feels like I'm still processing everything that happened. I grew up with my mom, Colleen, and dad, Jim, in a small suburban town just outside of Seattle. Our house wasn't large, but it felt like home. As a kid, I remember the feeling of being a little bit invisible in my own family. My mom and dad were always so focused on keeping up appearances. Everything had to look perfect on the outside. The lawn had to be well kept, the house had to be spotless, and all family events had to be just right. As I got older, I learned to deal with it. I wasn't always the best at speaking up, and I wasn't a natural people pleaser like my mom. But I learned quickly that keeping her happy often meant doing a lot of the work myself. It wasn't anything new when I moved back in with them after my divorce. It wasn't even that I was desperate to be around them, but more like it felt like the only option. My marriage had fallen apart, and financially I wasn't in a great place. So back to my childhood home I went, hoping it would be temporary. But from the moment I moved back in, I noticed something. My mom never let me forget that she had been the one to take care of me all those years ago. It was always a subtle thing, like reminding me of the sacrifices she had made for me. But as the months went by, I began to see that it wasn't just nostalgia or some misplaced sense of maternal duty. She had expectations of me, more than I realized. It started with small things. I'd come home from work to find a note on the kitchen table reminding me to take care of something. One week, it was the car insurance. The next, it was a new light fixture for the living room. At first, I didn't mind. It wasn't like I was doing anything else with my time. I wanted to be helpful. I had always been the responsible one in the family, and my mom had always leaned on me for that. But as the weeks turned into months, it began to feel a bit too much. I was paying for groceries, covering some of the utility bills, and even fixing things around the house that my mom and dad had neglected. But the real tipping point came when her birthday was approaching. Colleen had always been the center of attention in our family. It wasn't necessarily a bad thing. People love her, and she has this energy that just draws people in. But it wasn't just the people at her parties that mattered to her. It was an event. She didn't want just a birthday dinner. She wanted something that would make her feel important. So, when she called me a couple of weeks before her 60th birthday, I was already mentally bracing myself for what would come next. "I'm planning something for my birthday. I want you to help with all of it. You know how I am about these things." I knew how she was. The help she was asking for wasn't really help, it was a command. I could already feel the weight of it. "What do you need, Mom?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Well, for starters, I need you to handle the catering. It's going to be a big event. I want the best food, the best service. I also need you to get the flowers and the decorations. You're great at that kind of stuff." She paused, and then came the kicker. "Oh, and the money for all of it. I'll pay you back, but you know the bonus comes next month. Just get it all covered for now." There was a pause, but I didn't object. I was so used to covering things for her, it almost felt like second nature. But even then, a small voice in the back of my head whispered that this wasn't fair, that I shouldn't be doing this. But I pushed it aside. I wasn't going to disappoint her. Over the next few days, I threw myself into the planning. I paid for everything. It wasn't a small amount either, definitely over $2,000 when it was all said and done. Catering, flowers, a professional photographer, an elaborate cake. I took care of it all, hoping that it would make her happy. But the night of the party, the atmosphere was tense. My mom was smiling, laughing with her friends, accepting compliments, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all just an act. I had noticed how she had been acting toward me all day, more distant than usual, almost. Indifferent, she didn't thank me for all the hard work I put into the evening. She didn't even seem to recognize it. After the last guest had left and the house fell quiet, my mom came into the kitchen where I was cleaning up. Her expression was unreadable. She watched me for a moment, almost like she was deciding how to start the conversation. Finally, she said, in a tone that was sharper than usual, "You know, Leela, you're so desperate to be liked. Always organizing things, always spending money. It's pathetic. You can't buy people's love, you know." I froze. The words hit harder than I could have ever imagined. Here I was, trying to make her feel special, trying to prove my worth, and she was just dismissing it. I didn't even know what to say at first. I wanted to argue, to tell her that this was what I thought she wanted, but nothing came out. Instead, I just stared at her, feeling a wave of realization wash over me. I'd been giving, and it had never been enough. No matter how much I did, it felt like it wasn't ever going to be good enough. That night, I didn't say anything to her. I didn't yell. I didn't break down. I just packed up my things. In complete silence, I gathered my clothes, a few personal items, and left. I didn't want to deal with her. I didn't want to beg for love or approval anymore. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was mine. It felt like freedom. I didn't tell her where I was going. I didn't leave a note. I just vanished. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was my mom's number. I picked it up, not sure what to expect. What came through the receiver was her frantic voice. "Leela, what did you do?" she yelled, sounding like she was on the verge of a breakdown. "The mortgage didn't go through. We can't afford the house. Why didn't you tell me?" She didn't even finish her sentence. I felt a cold pit in my stomach, but it wasn't from concern. It was from something else entirely, something that felt like the weight of all the years of manipulation coming to a head. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said, the words coming out so calmly that they surprised me. "I can't help you anymore. You need to figure this out on your own." There was silence. Then she sobbed, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. "Not anymore." "I'm sorry, I really am," I said before hanging up the phone. "I don't know how things are going for her now. I haven't heard from her since that call. But here I am, living in my small apartment, finding myself again. I've learned a lot from all of this. I've learned that family isn't always about giving everything you have until there's nothing left. I've learned that you can't pour from an empty cup. I don't regret moving out, not for a second. But sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet, I still wonder if I'll ever hear from her again. And if I do, what I'll say. It's been a few more weeks since that phone call with my mom. I keep expecting her to reach out, maybe with some kind of apology or at least a message that acknowledges what happened. But nothing. Silence. And honestly, I'm starting to wonder if that's what it's always going to be, me being the one to take the first step, me being the one to patch things up, even when I'm the one who's been hurt. There's a strange kind of peace that comes with being alone in my apartment. I can't quite explain it, but it's different from the chaos I felt living at my mom's. I don't have to tiptoe around her moods anymore. I don't have to worry about whether I'm doing enough to keep her happy. I can just exist. But even with all that, the guilt creeps in sometimes. I wonder if I did the right thing. Could I have handled it better? Should I have stayed and worked through things with her? But every time I ask myself that, I remember the words she said that night after the party. "You're so desperate to be liked." They echo in my mind, making the guilt easier to shove aside. A few days ago, I got a text from my dad. It wasn't long, just a simple message that said, "I'm sorry, we've been dealing with a lot, but we'll get through it. I hope you're okay." I stared at the screen for a long time before I responded. Part of me wanted to pour everything out to him, to tell him how I felt about my mom, how I felt about all of it. But I didn't. I couldn't bring myself to, not yet. I just replied with a short, "I'm doing okay. I hope you're doing well too." I thought that would be the end of it, but a few days later he called. I almost didn't pick up. What was there to say? But against my better judgment, I did. "Leela," he started, his voice soft. "Your mom is. She's struggling. This mortgage situation, it's worse than she's letting on. We're in danger of losing the house. I don't know what to do." I felt a knot form in my stomach. I couldn't ignore the tone in his voice. It wasn't the usual tone of a man who was trying to avoid responsibility. This time, it sounded like he was asking for help. But I didn't know how to help. I was tired of being the one to clean up the messes they left behind. "You need to figure it out, Dad," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I can't be the one to fix everything anymore. I've done my part." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then he sighed, defeated. "I know, I didn't know what else to say. I don't want to lose the house. I don't want to lose everything." I could hear the desperation in his voice. But it didn't change the fact that I had been carrying that weight for years. It didn't change the fact that I had been expected to pull them out of every mess they created, even when I didn't have the strength to keep holding everything up. "I'm sorry, Dad," I said, my voice softer now, "but I can't do this anymore. I've given all I have, and right now I need to take care of myself." He didn't argue. Instead, he just let out another sigh. "Okay, I get it, I'll figure something out. Thanks for talking." We hung up shortly after, and I felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. I didn't regret what I said, but I did feel sad. I hated that it had come to this. I hated that it seemed like my parents were incapable of standing on their own 2 feet. But I couldn't save them anymore. I couldn't keep sacrificing my own happiness for theirs. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept tossing and turning, replaying everything that had happened over the past few months in my head. My marriage, my mom's birthday party, the way she dismissed everything I had done for her, it all felt like too much. I had put so much effort into everything, trying to make everyone else happy, and in the end, it wasn't enough. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something. I had been living for them. For my mom, for my dad. For Mark, my ex-husband. I had spent so much of my life trying to be what everyone else wanted me to be, trying to fix their problems, trying to fill their voids, that I had forgotten who I was. I wasn't just their daughter. I wasn't just the one who had to be strong for them to make things right. I was me, Leela Armstrong, and I deserved to live for myself, not just to make other people feel comfortable. So I made a decision that night. I wasn't going to call my mom. I wasn't going to beg for her attention or her love anymore. If she wanted to reach out to me, she would. But I wasn't going to chase after it. I wasn't going to chase after her anymore. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, even though part of me still felt that pang of guilt. But I told myself that I couldn't carry their burden anymore. I couldn't carry anyone else's weight except my own. The weeks passed, and life started to feel a little more normal. I focused on my job, which I had been neglecting for a while, and I started rebuilding my social life. I reconnected with a few old friends, and it felt good to laugh and talk about something other than family drama. I took weekend trips on my own, exploring the area around Seattle. I visited the Pike Place Market and sat at the waterfront, just enjoying the quiet. But there were moments when the silence from my parents was deafening. Every time my phone rang, I would hesitate, half expecting it to be them. I wanted to hear from them. I wanted them to acknowledge what had happened, to apologize for the years of manipulation, guilt, and control. But it never came. Instead, I kept getting these random, almost desperate text messages from my mom. At first, they were about small things, like her needing help with fixing the sink or asking if I could send over a few dollars for some groceries. Each time, I just ignored them. I wasn't going to get sucked back in. One evening, as I was sitting on my couch with a glass of wine and a good book, I got another text from her. It was short, but this time it was different. It said, "Leela, I miss you. I wish things were different. I'm sorry. Please call me when you can." I stared at the screen for a long time. It wasn't much of an apology, but it was something. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I took a deep breath, set the phone down, and went back to my book. I was learning to live for myself, not for anyone else. And maybe, just maybe, that was the best thing I could do for both of us. Over the following days, I kept rereading that text. "Leela, I miss you. I wish things were different. I'm sorry, please call me when you can." For most people, a message like that from their mother might have meant something more. A sign of warmth, of reconciliation, maybe even remorse. But with my mom, it wasn't that simple. There was always something underneath. A motive, a need. And even though part of me wanted to believe she was being sincere, the other part, the part that had spent years cleaning up her emotional messes, remained skeptical. I didn't reply. Not right away, not for a week. I told myself I needed time to think, but in truth, I was afraid. Afraid that if I opened that door again, I'd be pulled right back into the same cycle. Guilt, obligation, resentment, silence. Repeat. I was finally starting to feel a kind of peace in my life. My mornings were quiet, my evenings were mine, and the air in my apartment didn't carry that underlying tension that always seemed to linger in my childhood home. But it wasn't just about peace, it was about identity. For the first time, I was carving out a space that belonged to me. I was choosing who I allowed in, what I gave energy to, and it felt good. It felt right. Still, I couldn't deny that the message had cracked something open in me. I began remembering things I had spent a long time trying to forget. Like the time in high school when I saved up to take myself to a summer writing workshop, only to have my mom borrow the money 2 days before registration because the electricity bill was overdue. She promised to pay me back. She never did. Or the time in college when she called me in tears because she'd overdrawn the bank account and needed help buying groceries. I wired her my last $150 for the month and lived off instant noodles until payday. She told me, "You're such a good daughter," then spent the next 3 days ignoring my texts. Those weren't isolated incidents. That was my normal, and yet, I still missed her. Even now, I missed the way she'd hum while she cooked and how she always insisted on dancing in the kitchen when her favorite 80s songs came on. I missed her laugh when it was genuine, not performative. I missed the idea of her, the version of her I'd always hoped she could be. A few days later, I finally texted her back. Me, "Hi Mom, I got your message. I hope you're okay," she replied almost instantly. "Mom, I'm not okay, I miss you, can we talk?" I didn't respond right away, I needed to think. But the next morning she called. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message later in the day. Her voice sounded tired. She wasn't yelling, she wasn't accusatory. "Leela, I know you're hurt. I know I've said things I shouldn't have. I'm not good at this. I just want to fix things. Please, just talk to me." I played it again, and then one more time. It wasn't exactly the apology I wanted, but it was the closest she'd ever come. And part of me was curious. Has she really changed? Was she actually trying to take responsibility? Or was this just another version of the same pattern: guilt, pity, promises, and then silence? I didn't want to get pulled in, but I also didn't want to spend the rest of my life wondering. So I agreed to meet her. We met at a quiet cafe not far from the house I grew up in. It was strange, seeing her there alone. She looked older than I remembered, more fragile. There was a nervous energy about her, like she wasn't quite sure how to behave. She stood when I approached but didn't reach for a hug. I was grateful for that. We sat, ordered coffee, and then there was silence. "I'm glad you came," she said finally. "I wasn't sure I would." "I know," she nodded. "I deserve that." I studied her face. There were lines there I didn't remember, tiredness in her eyes that hadn't always been there. Or maybe it had and I just hadn't noticed. She went quiet for a long moment, then sighed. "Things have been rough since you left. Your dad and we've been arguing a lot. The house situation, it's still bad. And I've been thinking a lot about what I said. That night." I waited. "I don't know why I said that to you," she admitted, her voice cracking a little. "That you're desperate to be liked, that was cruel and untrue. You were doing everything you could to make my birthday special, and I just threw it back in your face." "That's exactly what you did," I said quietly. She didn't argue, just nodded, tears forming. "I think I've always expected too much from you, treat you more like a safety net than a daughter, and I hate that." I didn't respond. I didn't know how. I didn't trust it yet. She looked down at her hands. "I miss you, Leela. Not the money, not the help. I want to try again. I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know if I can, but I want to try." It was the most honest I'd ever heard her. I sipped my coffee and sat back in my chair. The silence between us was different now, heavier but not hostile. Like we were both waiting to see if something new could begin. She didn't push me to move back in. She didn't ask for money, and I didn't offer. That in itself felt like a breakthrough. We parted without a hug, but there was something in her eyes as we said goodbye. Not expectation, not manipulation, just something softer. Like maybe she was starting to see me, not just as the daughter she could rely on, but as a person with limits. A person who had stepped away, and might return one day, but only on her own terms. I walked back to my car with 1,000 thoughts swimming in my head. I didn't know where this would lead. I didn't know if she'd slip back into her old habits. But I did know one thing. I wasn't the same woman who had packed up in the dead of night, terrified and exhausted. I am stronger now. And I wasn't going back to who I was. Not for her, not for anyone. The weeks that followed our cafe meeting were cautious. Controlled. My mom would text every few days, just light, superficial messages. A recipe she tried, a show she was watching, the weather. There were no requests for money, no guilt trips, and as strange as it sounds, the lack of pressure felt foreign. Part of me wondered if she was laying low, waiting for the right moment to pull me back in. But part of me, the part that still had a sliver of hope, thought maybe she really meant what she said. Still, I wasn't willing to risk slipping into old patterns, so I didn't visit, I didn't call. I maintained the space I'd fought so hard for, but I kept watching. Quietly, from a distance. One afternoon, I got a text from my dad. "Dad, we're selling the house. Can we meet? There's something you should know." I stared at it for a while. Selling the house? That was huge. That house was their pride, their status symbol. It didn't matter how behind they were on payments. My mom never wanted to admit they couldn't keep it. So, for her to agree to sell, something big must have happened. Curiosity got the better of me. We met at a Denny's neutral ground. He looked exhausted, more than I'd ever seen him. "We're losing the house," he said bluntly. There's no other way to say it. "I figured as much," I said. "The mortgage didn't go through and I walked away." He nodded slowly. "That night, it shook your mom. She'd always assumed you'd keep helping. When you left, it was like the floor gave out beneath her." I stayed quiet. I wasn't going to let pity creep in. He pulled out a manila envelope and slid it across the table. "What's this?" "It's everything," he said. "Bank statements, credit reports, the full picture. We want you to see what you were actually holding up. Because your mom finally admitted it, she manipulated you. We both did." I hesitated, then opened the envelope. As I flipped through the documents, my jaw tightened. Tens of thousands in credit card debt, missed payments going back over a year, maxed out lines of credit. A second mortgage I never even knew about, signed shortly after I moved in. They'd been spiraling for years, and I'd been their financial tourniquet, keeping the bleeding from showing. "When your mom asked for birthday money," my dad said, "we had just missed 2 consecutive mortgage payments. She used your help to buy time. The party, it wasn't even about her birthday. It was about proving we still had status, that everything looked normal. You paid for the image, not the celebration." A deep, ugly silence settled between us. "Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve to know what you saved yourself from." I took a breath, a deep, bitter one. "And what? Do you want forgiveness?" "No," he said. "We want to sell the house before it forecloses. If we do, there might be something left over, not much, but a little." That's when it clicked. That's why they'd reached out again. That's what was coming. "Let me guess," I said, feeling the old familiar flicker of cold clarity. "You want me to help one last time." He held up a hand. "No, that's not what I came for. Actually, your mom had another idea." I raised an eyebrow. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, crumpled receipt. "A check stub, from the party. Your mom kept all the receipts from the birthday," he said. "Everything you paid for. And she wrote down every dollar you've spent since moving back. Groceries, bills, furniture, all of it." I blinked. "What are you talking about?" "She's giving you the total," he said. "She wants to pay you back with the equity left from the sale. Whatever's left after the bank, you get. The house isn't worth much anymore, but you're at the top of the list." I was stunned. "She said it's the only way she'll be able to live with herself, and I think she means it." I sat there in silence. For the first time, something in me cracked, not in weakness but in power. I had walked away. I had refused to fix it. And now here they were, offering restitution. Not a real apology, not years of emotional repair, but money. Cold, measurable repayment. It wasn't emotional closure, but it was a symbol. A tangible acknowledgement of everything I had poured into their lives, and how much I had allowed myself to lose. 2 months later, the house went on the market. It sold quickly, below asking, of course, but fast enough to avoid foreclosure. I didn't say anything when I saw the listing online. I didn't drive by. I didn't call. 3 weeks after the sale closed, a certified letter showed up at my apartment. Inside was a check. $18,743. No note, just the check. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at it. It wasn't a fortune, but it wasn't nothing either. It was, in many ways, the total value of my silence, my guilt, my misplaced loyalty. I could have used it for anything: rent, savings, a vacation. Instead, I used every last dollar of it to register my LLC. I'd always wanted to start my own business. Interior design. Something that had always been a passion, something I'd buried under obligations and other people's emergencies. I got a small studio space, bought a few essentials, and started offering staging services for real estate listings. Within 6 months, I had enough clients to quit my job and go full-time. Every time I walked into someone else's home, I thought about how I'd helped prop up the illusion of one for so long. Now I was building spaces that were honest, comfortable, real. I didn't hear from my parents after that, not a word. But through the grapevine, I learned they'd moved into a small rental condo across town. Nothing fancy, modest, quiet. A month after launching my website, I got a ping, a new email inquiry. Subject line: home staging needed referral from previous client, the sender, Colleen Armstrong. I stared at the screen, smirking to myself. No greeting, no recognition, just, looking to sell a rental unit, need someone for light staging. I was told you're very professional, rates? I sat back in my chair and smiled, typed one sentence in response. Hi Colleen, I appreciate the referral. Unfortunately, I'm currently booked out through the end of the year. Best of luck with your sale. And hit send. Revenge, as it turns out, doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's just living well, quietly, on your own terms, while the people who once drained you have to learn to live without you. And when they come back, needing your help, your time, your talents, you get to decide, not out of spite, but out of power and peace.